Liz Truss's resignation has sparked a new race for leadership in the United Kingdom. The Conservatives say a new Prime Minister will be announced by Friday next week. But the opposition is calling for an immediate general election. For more on this and what's next for the United Kingdom, we're joined now by Dr. Despina Alexiadou, and she is from the School of Government and Public Policy at the Strathclyde University. Doctor, thank you very much for your time, and thanks indeed for talking to us on this. Just describe the mood. I know that you are in Scotland, but describe the mood around the entire United Kingdom. After just 45 days in office, Liz Truss is gone.
Yes, good morning, and it's very nice to be here. Thank you so much. The mood is one of desperation, really. If one just watches the mainstream channels on TV and people interviewed on the street, they really seem to really want to go for a general election at this point. And in fact, this morning on Twitter, I saw one survey done a couple of years back where residents in the UK were asked if they would prefer general elections over a party vote for the new Prime Minister, and 2/3 would prefer general elections. So that seems to be the popular will right now.
In your own words, what went wrong?
Oh, God, so much went wrong. Well, obviously, Boris Johnson and his parliamentary group had the mandate. They won a big election. And clearly what their platform was really what they were elected for. The problem really was, well, Mr. Johnson's conduct, code of conduct, if you wish, in office. I mean, he had to leave because of his personal acts, not because of what the government did. And after that, of course, it's complicated because parties want to be democratic and they want to democratically elect their leaders. But during a midterm, right, so I mean, during the cycle of the government, it's not clear that it makes sense for the party base to elect their leader, since that leader then does not have the mandate by the people, right, by voters. So I think that's what went wrong. Liz Truss was voted by the party base, not by the parliamentary group. So then it was very hard to have the support in the group. Not to mention that she was not particularly strategic. When she put together her cabinet, she chose the most loyal people and the ones that were the closest to her ideologically. Now, this made sense, but not if you're not elected by your parliamentary group, you're by your own MPs. What she should have done is basically have a cabinet like the one yesterday, for example, with Hunt as the Chancellor and Shapps the domestic portfolio or something like that, to create coalitions within the party, the parliamentary group. But she didn't do that. Therefore, she didn't have any support.
Sure. How much economic damage has Liz Truss's administration done to the UK government's credibility in the financial market?
I think, well, that's a hard one. I think it depends partly what's going to happen in the next couple of days. Probably my kind of prediction is if Sunak is elected, the markets will ease because he has been a competent finance minister. The markets know him. I mean, he's a former banker. And my own work actually shows that the markets trust former bankers.
Yeah.
So I think it will be okay, to be honest. And look, Liz Truss was not the only one that damaged Britain's economic credibility. Brexit did that already, right? It's not like everything was going perfect and suddenly she came with her, crazy budget, but right. So I think someone like Sunak, and if they were able to stabilize things and eventually go to elections, I think it's temporary, but it depends on the political events. Markets actually are as worried about economic policy as political stability. We should not forget that.
Yeah.
It's the politics that matter.
You raise the name of Rishi Sunak, and you actually prompt me to ask the question, why was he overlooked in the first place? Because as things stand now, it would appear that there are those who are starting to say, perhaps we should bring back Boris Johnson. Who, in your view, is best qualified at this stage within the Conservative Party to lead the United Kingdom?
Well, first of all, Boris Johnson is still under investigation. It's not clear to me. I mean, he had to go. His own ministers didn't trust him. His own ministers stepped down. So I think it's going to be extremely hard for him to move forward and have the party behind him. I mean, the parliamentary group. On the other hand, Sunak, even though, of course, he was Johnson's minister, he managed to have his own brand. He, I think, presented a kind of, during the contest, the leadership contest, he showed that he had fixed kind of stable positions. Now, also interestingly, his positions are very centrist within the Conservative parliamentary group. So he's not in any way an ideological extremist. And even though he supported Brexit, kind of the overall policy agenda that Sunak has or stands for, according to his own words, that is one that is one of the most uniting, if you wish, where people will be more willing to work with him than someone who has more extreme views. And Boris Johnson, in a way, does have a little bit more, a bit more populist, right?
Yeah.
Sunak, I think, can unite the more moderates, perhaps more kind of technocratic people, but also bring together maybe the more populist ones, if that makes sense.
You'll correct me if I'm wrong, and I there's no better way of phrasing this question. Do you think that there is a race element as well that we are overlooking here? And I'm talking about Rishi Sunak possibly occupying that role. His parents come from India, but as I understand it, he's a naturalized British national. But if he were to raise his hand for the second time, and again he is overlooked, should we start talking about the race element, or is that something that is far-fetched in the minds of British people?
I don't know the answer to this question. I don't know, because partly I think this is a question that people won't admit. It's not obvious how we would reveal people's true preferences. Do people even know in the end why they're more likely, let's say, to trust or not trust a politician, right? Do they know that they have underlying biases or, that they're not aware of? So I think race is always somewhere in the background, isn't it? And then the question is how much aware you are of it and how much you're willing to put it aside. I think the majority of people are, they have biases, even if they're implicit and they just are not aware of them. So, I don't know. In some ways, so I was wondering, for example, the same with sexism, right? Liz Truss was treated very, very poorly by the media and by her own colleagues. And on the one hand, you can say, well, she was responsible. She didn't make, as I said, maybe the right alliances or whatever. But I wonder sometimes if she would have been treated like this if she was a man. I don't know. Okay. At least you've given it some thought. I know that it's probably one question you didn't anticipate. Let's try this one. Liz Truss and this budget
This was billed as the great political gamble by her and her administration. It's now backfired spectacularly. For those that trade with the UK, the global trading partners with the United Kingdom, how much of a risk is the UK right now?
So it is a risk. They have not dealt with the Northern Ireland Protocol. I mean, their trade relations since 2020, January 2020, when Brexit went into effect, they haven't managed to increase their trade agreements. Why is that? It has to be that either they're incompetent in making these deals, which is possible, or yes, their trade partners are hesitant. They want to see, well, this country has to choose its direction, and it has not done it yet.
Yeah. Final question. How much time will it take to repair the British government's finances after this disaster? Because it is a disaster. I was just listening to the leader of the main opposition, the Labour Party, and he says we cannot afford to have a revolving door of chaos.
I don't know. I'm not the expert here on this, but so a lot of it obviously depends on the gas prices internationally. That's huge because that's where the first big hole in the budget comes from, the support to consumers for paying their electric and gas. So that's one variable we can't control. The tax they voted to not increase the national insurance tax, that's clearly creating a big issue here because Sunak introduced it for the very reason that the NHS is really on its knees. It's beyond on its knees, actually. It's really so bad. You have no idea how bad it is. People just can't see the doctor at this point. So that's a huge problem. But taxes have to go up. It's impossible. Otherwise, they'll really have to cut significant services that will affect not just the quality of life, but will affect people's health, which is already affected, but even worse. So no, that will take a while to fix. There are big problems here.
Yeah. Perhaps one final one. I'm letting you go, I promise. What will cure the political instability in the United Kingdom? There are those opposition parties who are strongly advocating for a general election to say we can't put our lives in the hands of the Conservative Party, which clearly has a problem.
Yes, and part of the problem is the electoral system in the UK, which makes political parties act in a very adversarial way. Elections are zero-sum. There has to be a winner and a loser. And that doesn't necessarily help with political stability because you can't create often the necessary alliances. This means also that, for example, all voters and politicians who don't, for one reason or another, do not want to join the Labour Party are forced to the Conservatives. Now, other parties exist, but they have so slim chances, and as we see, their votes do not translate into the seats, right? So because of the majoritarian electoral system. So, of course, then that means the parties themselves are very hard to govern within because they're huge umbrellas. I don't want to give a lecture on electoral systems, but the point is, at this point in time, I think, yes, a general election. So the Tory party has governed for many years now, 12 years. It's time for them to go to the opposition benches, recollect and, refine themselves, however you want to put it. Labour, clearly, with Keir Starmer, have taken a more, if you wish, centrist position compared to Jeremy Corbyn. So I think a lot of businesses and voters that maybe would not have voted Jeremy Corbyn are likely to vote Starmer. And and they could even have coalitions. I don't know why, for example, Labour is so much against having a coalition with SNP, but that's their own thing. But generally, I believe, in studying European politics for many years, coalitions are not a bad thing. Because they force you to make compromises in ways that lead to more political stability most of the time. Not always, most of the time.
Very interesting view indeed. Dr. Despina Alexiadou, she's with the University of Strathclyde in Scotland.